Welcome back, Miranda here. In this session, we're going to be talking about some really exciting things. Are you ready? We're going to be talking about structure, patterns, and planning. For all of those of you that are not super administratively focused, you probably want to turn this video off. You can't, you shouldn't, you may want to. For those of you that are a little bit more like me that love administration and planning, you're getting really excited, right? So maybe grab the person next to you, help them be a little bit more excited, and we're gonna go through this. I absolutely love talking and looking at structure. I think that, and keep this in mind, and I think this is one of your blanks, structure should be life-giving. I think when we first think about structure, we have a tendency to think that it's going to stifle things or put us in a box, or it's just going to be stuffy and it's all about just structure and planning, and it's not a great thing. But here's the key. Structure should be, and if it's done well, is intended to be life-giving. As a ministry, if we have no structure, and we just kind of run full force into the campus, we can grow and we can get really big. But what's going to happen is we're going to grow kind of like a mushroom, and then there's nothing to hold or sustain, and eventually it's just going to collapse and come back in. But if we will take the time, take a little bit of effort, and put some structure to it, as we grow, not only will we grow up, but we'll be able to grow out. And we're going to be a little bit more like a tree and less like a mushroom. A mushroom, it's just kind of floppy and wompy, and it's going to cave in. A tree, though, sets itself up to be able to grow and be bigger and bigger and bigger, and it's life-giving and sustaining. The other thing about ministry and structure is that it should be relational still. Ministry is about relationships. We are building communities on campus. We're wanting to reach students and live life with them. So even as we're looking at our structure, keeping in mind that it should be life-giving and that it also needs to be relational. I know for myself, one of my things that I have to be careful of is that I can process task over relationship. It's just kind of the way that I'm wired. It's the way that God created me. And it's not really okay. I need to make sure that I'm processing relationship before task. And so even in our structures, we're setting those things up. We want to make sure that we're processing people, relationship, over just the structure and the task of things. So structure should be life-giving, and structure should also be relational. We're building structures so that we can build community and be relational with students. I want to talk about 3 different areas that really we need to give some structure attention to, because they're going to be the backbones, they're going to be the skeleton, they're going to be the branches that really are holding things up so that we can grow and develop as a ministry. The first area that we need to make sure that we're structuring well is leadership. So when I talk about leadership, there's actually a couple of different components to that. Because we're based out of the local church, there is that type of leadership that we need to look at. What is the structure in regards to that? So you, as leader of this university student ministry, what is your relationship with the staff of the church, or what is your relationship with the pastor? What does that structure look like? How much do you need to report in? How much do you make the decisions by yourself and run with it? Or how much do you need to come back and be able to bounce those things with senior pastor or whoever your staff oversight person may be? So we just need to know what those things are and know the structure so that there's more freedom, life-giving, to be able to grow and dream and do what we need to do to reach the campus. The other side of leadership that we want to look at is in regards to our students. So when I say student leaders, what I'm talking about is your students, actual university students, that are leading Bible studies or life groups on your campus. Those are student leaders. They're the ones that are leading something, but again, they're students. And so when we look at our student leaders, we need to make sure that we've got really good structure in place with them as well. We are asking students to serve and to engage and to reach their campus. So we need to make sure that we're giving them really good oversight, that we're giving them really good pastoral care, that we're providing training and equipping, that we are helping them to be the best student leaders that they can be. And so we've got to make sure that we've got really good structure in place for that. And we're going to explore that a little bit more in a later video, talking about discipling your student leaders and giving them oversight. But just keep in mind that that is an area of the ministry that needs to be structured really well for everyone to win, for everything to function and work well. Another area that we need to make sure that we're structuring well are events. There are different patterns, and we're going to talk about those in just a moment, patterns that will emerge as you're doing university student ministry. But we need to make sure when we're talking about events that we structure as far as our diary and our schedules, making sure that things are planned out really well. Also, as we structure an event itself, it allows freedom for people. If I know my area that I need to oversee in an event, then that would release you to do what you need to do, and we're not all running around trying to do the same thing. So if we structure things well, it brings in freedom and releases us to be able to do what it is that we actually need to do. There's so much freedom and structure if we build it to be life-giving and relational all at the same time. And then obviously we need some really good structure when it comes to people as well. How are we helping people come into the ministry? What are the paths that we're giving them to get involved? How are we helping them to plug in? What is the follow-up process? That's a great thing that we need to look at and make sure is structured well. When students come into our ministry for the first time, how do we follow up on them? If we have this just kind of idea that someone will talk to them, someone will follow up on them, but there's no actual structure or decision in place for doing that, then we're gonna lose students. They're gonna slip through the cracks. They're gonna come once and never come back again because we didn't follow up with them well. And so with people, we need to make sure that we've got really good structure as well. How are we getting them plugged in? How are we acclimating them into the community? How are we allowing them and giving them opportunity to really get involved, to really be a part, and to really plug into this community? So we need to make sure, again, when we're talking structure, that we're looking at our areas of leadership, that we're looking at events, and that we're looking at people. And again, if we do this well, all of it should be life-giving and relational. Those are the two things that we want to keep in mind as we move forward with structure: life-giving and relational. We also want to make sure that as we're building these structures that we keep in mind the fact that we always want to be authentic, that we want to be relational, and that we want to have substance. We don't want just structure. And for those of you that are not always structure-minded, that's probably what you're concerned with. Man, I don't want to just build this ministry and it be cold. We don't want that. Again, it should be life-giving, relational. And also we always want to make sure that even in our structure, that we have authenticity, that we have relationships, and that we have substance. So these are all things that should be a part of our structure. And again, if done well, it'll help us to grow and build as a tree and not just the mushroom that's going to come up and then sink back in at some point. As we build this structure, we want to be aware of some patterns that happen. About 70% of ministry is rhythm. 70%, that's a lot. So that means if we can get the rhythm down of what we're doing, then we can almost just kind of get into this groove and keep going versus starting and stopping all the time. That is one thing with university student ministry is you start a semester, you end a semester, and there's always some backs in between, right? And then you start a semester, you end a semester, and then we go into a whole new year. And you have students constantly, new students that are coming in, and then you have students that are graduating. So it can get really hard to just keep going. You can feel like you're starting and stopping in a very jerky type of motion all the time. If we can identify the patterns and the rhythm, again, about 70% of ministry is rhythm. If we can identify those things, it will help us to build momentum and keep going. And we won't quite feel the force and the brunt of that start and stop like we would if we weren't prepared and looking ahead at those patterns and rhythm. There's a few different types of patterns in university student ministry that we want to look at. So one of the first things that we can look at, and really, you kind of look at all three of these patterns all at the same time, if that makes sense. So no one is greater than the other. But let's just break them apart. So the first one that we're going to look at is weekly patterns. What I mean by that is there are some things that as a ministry you're going to do every single week. So if we look at the church, there are things in the church that are happening every single week. Obviously there's Sunday services that are happening, There are connect groups or life groups that are happening every single week. Maybe your church has a midweek service that happens every Wednesday. So in the life of the church, you can identify these weekly patterns. The same thing is true with university student ministry. There are things that we are going to want to do every single week. So one of those things is we want to do some sort of weekly worship service. That may tie into the local church. So you may be hosting a student service at your church. It may be something that you're actually doing on your campus. It may be something that you're doing near campus. But that's something that for the most part, once we get established and going as a university student ministry, we want to be offering some type of worship service for our students every single week. Also during the week, you're going to want to be doing life groups that are on campus, or small groups or connect groups, whatever you may be calling them. I love life groups, but you have the freedom to call them whatever you want. But you want to make sure that those are happening on a weekly basis. Places for people to come together to discuss the Bible, to discuss God. How does it all fit together? And they're building community and relationship with one another. You also want to make sure that you have good leadership oversight and training and equipping that's happening on a weekly basis. If you have students that are leading Bible studies, you want to make sure that you're checking in with them, training and equipping them. And again, we're going to talk about that a little bit more a couple of videos later, but we want to make sure that we're providing oversight for them on a weekly basis. So as we look at those things and get that down, that will help us to find the weekly rhythm of our university student ministry. The next kind of pattern or rhythm that we want to look at is the semesterly rhythm. I think I made that word up, but we're just going to go ahead and call it a word. So we're going to look at our semesterly patterns. Those are the things that we're doing every single semester. It may not be a monthly or a weekly thing, but every semester, these are a few events that we want to make sure that we fit into our schedule. That would be things such as like leadership training classes. For new people that are wanting to come into leadership, we want to make sure that we're training them as well. So we would offer those on a semesterly basis. Maybe there are specific fellowship or fun events that you do each semester. And so that would be a semesterly rhythm that we're looking at. Maybe there are retreats or camps. Those types of things typically would fall into our semesterly rhythm of things. And then the last one that we would look at is our yearly rhythm. There are some things that happen once a year. So we will talk later about first year students and specifically reaching out to and targeting them. And so some of the things that we do in reaching out to first year students are going to be a yearly thing. So every single new year during the first 6 weeks, there are some things that we're going to do that will repeat every year. It's part of our yearly pattern. Doing leadership interviews, giving that opportunity for new students to apply, to come in and to be in leadership. That's something that happens once a year. So if we can look across the board at our weeks, our semesters, and our years and pick up on those patterns, that's going to help us find a great rhythm, a great groove, build some wonderful structure, and it takes a little bit of the pressure off. We're not scrambling on a regular basis trying to get things done, but we can settle into that rhythm and groove, and that's going to help us move forward. It's just going to help things grow and be a little bit smoother. A couple of more little patterns that we can look at as far as the year is concerned is knowing when different things kind of take place. And so I want to give you 3 examples of that. The first one is that at the beginning of the year, it's all about assimilation. And what that means is it's all about getting people into the community and into the culture of the ministry, getting them involved, getting them plugged in. And so the beginning of the year is always about assimilation, pulling in as many students as possible, making them feel like they're really a part of the family, are really a part of the community, and just plugging them in, getting them integrated. The middle of the year is more about consolidation. And so that's flowing off the tail end of assimilation. So assimilation, we're getting them in, we're getting them used to things. Consolidation is kind of when that shift happens of, this is a ministry that I go to, and this is my ministry. So we start to see students take ownership. We see them really consolidate relationships, really solidify things. And there's that shift, kind of that mindset of, this is just something I go to man, this is something that I belong to. This is something that I kind of own a little bit of. This is my ministry. This is my home. This is my family. And so we want to see students by the middle of the year, kind of in that time frame, really consolidate, be a part, solidify those relationships. And then the end of the year is about mobilization. We're mobilizing students. And that happens in a few ways. That's the leadership interviews and affirming leaders for the following year. We're mobilizing them to reach their campus. We're affirming them to reach their campus. Also, the later part of the year is when we're looking at doing maybe missions trips, whether that is domestic or we're trying to go international, whatever that may be. But towards the end of the year, moving into our summer vac, is kind of when we start looking at those things or when we start doing those things. We probably should have planned for that before then, but that's when they're going to start happening. And so we're mobilizing our students to go out and to make a difference. And so again, if we can kind of wrap our minds around and our schedules and diaries around those different patterns, that's going to help us a lot. Pick up those rhythms and really kind of settle into a great groove and not start and stop so much. So I mentioned just now that you would want to be planning for the end of the year before it happens. Planning in campus ministry is extremely vital and strategic. I mean, I think it is across the board in ministry. But again, as much as our university starts and stops, if we're not well planned, we're going to get behind. One of the most strategic times that we need to plan for is the first 6 weeks of the school year. So when lectures kick up in January or early February, the first 6 weeks, really that includes maybe 2 weeks before and then the first 4 weeks of the semester, the first 4 weeks of lectures, those are our most crucial times in the year because that's when students are coming back to campus. That's when first year students are finding their friend groups that they're going to hang out with for the rest of their time at varsity. That's when maybe new students are looking for something to get involved with. Or even as students are coming back to the university for their second or third or fourth year, they're more open during that first time of, do I want to settle back in with my friends? Do I want to try something new? And so we want to make sure that we are very well planned and strategic during that time. As 1 year wraps up, so as we're winding down, let's say in November, we want to be planning for what we're going to be doing in January because it just takes time. We need to be well planned. We need the time to think things through and build our strategy. Also, funding may be a factor. We want to give our students plenty of notice of when they need to be back for leadership things, for moving students into reses, maybe for a leadership camp or retreat where we can train, cast some vision, pour some things in, all of that kind of stuff. So we need to make sure that we're planning ahead, that we're thinking strategically ahead. So I would say October, November is going to be your key strategic planning time, prepping you for when things are going to kick up in January, February. If you wait until the beginning of January, you're going to struggle a bit and be a little bit behind. So we want to make sure that we're planning ahead and getting kind of ahead of the curve, that we're giving great structure, we're picking up on the patterns, and we're planning really, really well. So we've identified patterns, we've identified structure, we've identified areas, and you know that you need to be planned well. And so I encourage you, look at structure as what it can be and should be, life-giving and relational. Find the patterns, know that 70% of this is rhythm. Identify your rhythm and plan well. All of those things combined, you can be an incredibly successful and moving forward university student ministry. Together and strategically, we can make massive impacts on the university campus throughout South Africa.